It was going everybody. It's been a little bit, but here we back at it. You know how we do, so let's just get into it. Um, this video is going to be entitled, I think, "Acceptable Error." I want to say. So let's just get into it. Y'all understand. So trying to make this one a short one. Hopefully, y'all enjoying the beautiful day today. Um, I think we're manipulated, particularly about like voter fraud, right? And there's certain issues that like Republicans particularly use to like just always sprinkle in there to make people alarmed. And it almost doesn't matter what the rate of that issue is. It's just they always say it. It's like, and those two of those particular issues are crime and voter fraud, right? It's just like, even if like crime rates are going down, Republicans are like, oh, crime is still crazy and rampant, because it's just crime, so like, of course you can't like celebrate crime. And I think voter fraud is also one of those things, like, despite the fact that it's like statistically it's negligible and that it's never actually decided any outcome of any election and it's the most sound voting system in the world, yet you still have the Republican Party like having it be its primary thing on the platform, right? And trying to convince people in the consolidation of power to disenfranchise people. So I just want to attack this from a slightly different angle and just get y'all to think about this and ask questions when you're hearing people talk about voter fraud and all that kind of stuff. So first off, with the fact that it's only like 0.0003 or 0.0002, it's like sub a percent. You know what I'm saying? I was like well sub a percent. And again, it hasn't impacted any election. But what I think you should ask a question from these people that talk about it, they even somehow suggested like any voter fraud is the issue, is like, do you actually feel that there will be any voter system that will be free of fraud? Do they think that they somehow will invent a system that is fraud proof? Right now, there hasn't been a system on earth for anything that is fraud proof. And like, these are systems that are like highly secure, like banking systems and encrypting systems and government structures and all these things, science things. There are people that hack and break into all those things. It's just like a natural thing, right? So I think asking that question and getting them to really put their answer down will be the beginning of knocking the building blocks down, because it's completely impractical to suggest that you would ever be able to devise a system in anything, particularly in voting, that would completely eliminate all fraud, right? So once you've established that fact, then you have to get to the next question. Well, what's an acceptable level? If we've accepted the notion that there will never be a system that completely gets rid of fraud, what is an acceptable level of fraud, right? And it's something that, or a acceptable level of fraud and or error and or theft and or whatever. Because if you look at every single action in life, we put it through that same test, right? Let's just say something about like airplanes, right? Like, there's an acceptable amount of error to airplanes. Like, no one is saying that like one airplane crash is too much, right? But no one is saying when there's a random airplane crash that we're just going to stop and ground all airplane flights, right? We're going to end airplanes because, oh my God, there was one incident of such. Like, clearly, like, having one or two accidents a year is something that the world is clearly okay to have. You know what I'm saying? I was like, to keep airplanes going, right? And so if you're willing to do that with like death and people in the air, like, and we do that with everyday life, like, there's a risk that we're taking from driving in our cars, right? There's a much higher factor that you would get into a car accident than you would get into an airplane accident, but we get into those cars every day, right? So there is and are acceptable amounts of risk and satisfaction that you must establish whenever you're having anything, and voting needs to be that thing, right? And what is that thing? I mean, I think if we're determining it, it's like, okay, making sure that no amount of fraud disrupts any election, which is something that's occurred. A fraud that is like definitely like sub 1%, which is occurring, right? So I feel like once you ask that question and then start to think about it rationally and practically how we apply in our everyday lives, you're not allowed, to kind of go down that fucking rabbit hole of what they say of just like anything is okay, in the exception of getting rid of voter fraud. I mean, because we could say that thing like about crime, right? They want to we would love to get rid of crime, but there is never going to be any system where crime just doesn't exist, right? And so we have to have kind of an acceptable rate, you know what I'm saying, given our efforts and given how much it would occur in the natural world. But also, we have to think about, does the solution fit the crime? Right? Does the solution actually fit the problem that we're trying to solve? And particularly when you're talking about voting rights, like, let's talk about what the SAVE Act and what Trump is trying to do. So, like, in order to address an area of fraud which the Heritage Foundation is even found to have 0.0003%, which is completely negligible. They are willing to do the Save Act, which what does it does? It requires people to have passports. It requires like people to like re-register, and multiple studies have shown that it's going to affect married women the most. If you change your name as a wife, the name on your birth certificate is going to be different than the name on your other documents. And some people don't even have birth certificates anymore, right? It's going to impact elderly people. But regardless of the fact of the communities that it impacts, it's going to impact at least 40 to 100 million people. It could impact 40 to 100 million people, right? And so you're telling me to address 0.0003% at maximum amount of fraud, you're willing to potentially disenfranchise between 40 and 100 million people, which would represent like close to like a third of the actual voter base. Like, so the solution is to fuck up an overwhelming majority of people that are doing it right to try and stop this fraud. And see, that's what I'm saying. You would never do that with airplanes, right? To stop the 0.000001% of airplane crashes, you're going to down all the airplanes. No, but it does mean that you should try to, continuously stop fraud, but not at the hands of disenfranchising other people and stopping all flights. And I feel like that's just one thing we just have to bring into the discussion. Let's bring some common sense and let's bring some rhetoric into it, because otherwise they're going to run you in terms of ruining your rights. Like they're like, oh, let's stop this. Let's have this imaginary ability to stop fraud. So in order to do that, let me just take all of your rights away. Let me disenfranchise a whole bunch of people that are law-abiding citizens. Like, I just pray that we're not stupid enough to fall for this. And it's being manipulated in our morality of saying, of course, we don't want to have fraud. And that's being manipulated into like some irrational things that actually makes us disenfranchising people. And it's being used as a tool to manipulate and stop a majority of people from voting so that certain people can maintain their power. So hopefully it's a little food for thought. Until next time.